Brand new It's in the Game podcast here on the Ball is Life Podcast Network, which you can find on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find now the video version of the podcast on the Cruise Control Podcast Network on YouTube.com. I'm your host, Randy Cruz. You can follow me on Twitter at Randy J. Cruz, Rendy, the letter J, Cruz. I'm joined by a close friend of mine, Mr. Ian Begley from SNY. Ian, my man, how you doing?
Randy, what's happening, man? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Got the suit on for me. Got the nice fancy background. SNY. Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate
Come on, bro. Of course. Of course. I wanted to wear a tux for you, but my wife said it was a bad idea.
Before we start, man, I do want to applaud you. I'm proud of you for doing your video podcast now on SNY called The Putback. I know me and you have spoken about it offline years ago about you should be doing your own podcast, whether it's audio or video. Now you have the time, you have the platform to do it. I've seen a couple episodes already, doing a great job. So I just want to commend you for that right away.
Man, I appreciate that, bro. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're having fun over there. We're just getting started. But yeah, it's going to be, assuming we have regular season basketball next year at some point, we're going to have a lot to talk about. But there's always something to talk about with the NBA and the Knicks and the Nets.
And just for you, man, got my shirt on for you. Look at that.
There
Look
he
at
is.
that. There you
There
go.
he is.
Eighth pick, right?
Listen, you know better than I do over there that they just don't have good luck. They haven't had good luck for a while.
No, they haven't.
But you will get into it. I think they do have options there at 8. I don't think it's the end of the world because of the way the draft is set up. But just the idea that they haven't moved up since 1985, they've fallen back in the lottery. And 4 of their last 6 appearances, it's just crazy.
So real quick, you have been a writer for so long for many various outlets, but now you're into the podcasting game. Have you been getting acclimated to it? Do you find it different, more difficult, or challenging? Now you have to speak the words that you write, and how you been doing with that?
Yeah, it's fun, man. I'm enjoying it. I like it's a loose kind of atmosphere, loose setup. The challenge is doing it every week and kind of getting everything lined up every week while, doing the rest of your job. But I'm enjoying it so far. We're getting into a rhythm, and it's been fun. I think that one thing I really like about it is you get to see people's expressions, facial expressions, their tone. So it's not just quoting them on a website. You're seeing them in the flesh. You're seeing them smiling, frowning, angry, happy, whatever it is. I like that a lot, that comes across in these interviews.
Likewise. So before we get into the Knicks and the draft, obviously we're in a crazy time with a pandemic. We got racial protesting going on. The NBA is on hold for now until tomorrow. We're taping this on Friday, so the playoffs would resume tomorrow, Saturday.
Yeah.
Just want to get your feedback, your opinions on what's been going on. The players striking, doing their own protests, from the NBA to the WNBA to Major League Baseball to some NFL teams canceling practice, and some NHL teams all across the board, all the sports sticking together in unity for standing up for police brutality, and that stuff has to stop. We've been going through this for far too long, and somehow, some way, it's got to start somewhere. And I think the players have had, they were in the bubble and they just had enough of what's been going on, took a stance. All the teams were in support of that. The players were in support of it. Just in the last couple of days, how have you been taking the news of everything that's been going on?
Yeah, just incredibly impactful when you see players take ownership or to empower themselves as a group in the way that they have, and strengthen numbers and strengthen size of the platform. And the players have large platforms and they have strength in numbers when they're all united behind a cause. And so when they walk out of those games on Wednesday, when they don't play on Thursday, that forces people that may not have these issues at the forefront of their minds every day to, at the very least, talk about the issue, have the issue on their mind because of the way the news story is covered. So I commend those players across all sports for doing what they did, because their goal was to put this in front of people's faces. They accomplished that goal. I think moving forward, regardless of what your politics are, if you're a player and you want to see police brutality lessened, you want to see actions taken against police brutality, you want to see the racial inequities in the country addressed. The key here is, what do you do moving forward? And now that it's on people's minds again, as it has been for most of this pandemic, the key is taking action. And I think we saw earlier on Friday action being taken, at least a plan for action with the NBA and the teams. One of the action plans that they announced was all the arenas that were owned by teams were going to be used as either places where people can vote in the presidential election, or people could register to vote in the presidential election. And there was also the plan of hiring people specifically to coordinate efforts to bring about social justice and social reforms. So that's tangible action, and it's not just conversations. And that's what I think matters most here is what's the plan moving forward? How can you execute that plan? Who's involved in the execution? Because we've talked about the owners having a lot of power here.
Yeah.
What the players are doing are forcing the owners' hands in a lot of these instances. And so that, to me, is interesting and could lead to tangible change.
And I think is key, real quick, key and important when you have big popular people like LeBron speaking up, and Doc Rivers and Jordan, and they want the owners to do more, not just give money to the certain communities and say, I did my deed. You got to do way more than that. So I would say put the pressure on the owners to do more going forward. I think the NBA and the NBA is going to work out some kind of coalition going forward. So just the last couple of days, man, just seeing what's been transpiring. 2020 is just bizarre by itself, and it's like, they can't wait till November to vote. I think that's the main thing to extract change. And I think just the NBA and the WNBA and other sports taking a stance really puts the emphasis back on what's really important and outside of basketball.
Yeah, there's no question that they're putting that message in front of people. Again, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, you're forced to think about it when players walk off the court, walk off their playing field, and games are being postponed or canceled.
Before that, we had the NBA draft lottery. You're in New York. I'm in New York. You covered the Knicks for so long for SNY and other outlets. I've been a fan of them for too long without getting any luck. And, we thought we were going to get at least a top 5, top 3 pick. We ended with number 8. Even before that, just to rewind, the Knicks have a new head coach in Tom Thibodeau. The 14th head coach since 1999, Ian. I think no other team has had 14 coaches in a matter of a 21-year span. Do you even remember the other 13 coaches prior to Tom Thibodeau?
Can't name them off the top of my head, but I certainly remember them. And, yeah, it's been a big revolving door. There's no doubt. And the stability on the sidelines or instability on the sidelines has been also a product of instability in the front office and instability on the roster. So what you're looking for, I think, if you're the Knicks, is stability in all those areas. And it starts with the leadership, Leon Rose, with William Wesley, and now with the coach, Tom Thibodeau. If those guys can move forward together in lockstep, can be on the same page in how they build this roster, then you would think that bodes well for the Knicks. We've seen so often in New York, everyone's on the same page day one. Things go sideways, adversity hits, and people kind of retreat to their corners, whether it's the coach against management, management against the coach, ownership upset. That's just how it plays out here. So if you can avoid that, I think that's a big step towards getting this thing turned around in the way you want it to be turned around.
So real quick, just to have fun with you, so the Knicks made the finals in 99, 21 years ago. So the coaches prior to Tom Thibodeau are Van Gundy, Don Chaney, Herb Williams, Lenny Wilkins, Herb Williams again, Larry Brown, Isaiah Thomas, Mike D'Antoni, Mike Woodson. We'll get to him in a second. Derek Fisher, Kurt Rambis, Jeff Hornacek, David Fisdale, and Mike Miller.
Off the top. Off the top.
No, I wrote it down. Look, that's a lot of coaches, man, for one team, 21 years.
That's a lot of money, too, for Jim Dolan to have paid the coaches' salaries a lot of the times for not working than for working.
So I'm just hoping Tom Thibodeau, a 5-year contract, right?
5 years. I don't know if every year is guaranteed on the deal, but it is 5 years.
So hopefully he'll be around the entire 5 years. I think it's a new day for the team. You mentioned earlier on your Twitter that they're rounding up the coaching staff, which now includes Thibodeau, Mike Woodson, Johnny Bryant, Andy Payne. I think
Kenny Payne.
Kenny Payne, Andy
Greer. Yeah.
And there's one more I'm missing.
Dice Yashimoto.
All right, so when you look at these guys under one roof and for the team to coach the Knicks, and one having Mike Woodson back, the guy who coached the Knicks to the playoffs back in 2013, 7 years ago, last time they made the playoffs. So you bring him back involved. What's your overall take on Thibodeau becoming the head coach of the Knicks and the overall staff he's building right now?
The staff is interesting to me because, Thibodeau and his past stops, Minnesota, Chicago, he's had his guys as his assistant coaches on his staff. And this is not that. This Kenny Payne, Mike Woodson, Johnny Bryant are guys that haven't coached on Thibodeau's staffs previously.
Right.
Andy Greer, Dice Yashimoto have. So it's a mix here, and that's a different dynamic for Thibodeau and for those coaches. It's interesting to me. Thibodeau has said that he's fine with working with the front office to add assistant coaches to his staff. It's just different than how his staffs have looked in the past. So that's something to keep an eye on. But as far as who they've added here, to me, you have addressed an area of weakness in player development by bringing on Kenny Payne and bringing on Johnny Bryant. Those two are known in coaching circles as top player development coaches. So now if you're the Knicks, you haven't signed a rookie to a second contract since Charlie Ward, which is crazy. And that's partially because of your player development issues. So you've addressed those, we think, with Payne and Bryant. That's a good thing. You have somebody on staff who knows how to deal with the market in Mike Woodson and knows what it's like to win here in Mike Woodson. That's a good thing. And you have familiarity with Thibodeau, with Greer and Yashimoto. You just wonder, though, how does this, if these guys hit adversity, are they all on the same page? Because they haven't worked together as a group in the past. That's something that you would wonder with any new staff, and that is something you'd wonder with this one as well.
So how important, how vital is it to bring Mike Woodson back into the fold? Again, he's the last coach to bring this Knicks team to the playoffs, bringing him back and his stability back into New York. How key and vital is that for Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks?
That's what you need. That's what everybody is looking for. That's what the franchise is looking for. And for Thibodeau, to have him, a guy who is a proven winner, you can debate about his methods, how he relates to players, doesn't relate to players, debate about that all day. You cannot debate his win-loss record. And his winning percentage, I think, is top 10 or top 11 among the coaches who've coached at least 500 games. So he wins games. And I think the key, though, is who do they bring in for him? What players are here for him? Do you get Thibodeau guys? Do you get non-Thibodeau guys? You have to get players to fit the coach. Also, does he adapt his approach when it comes to practices and playing time? He's talked about, different ways to approach those two things. We'll see if he puts that into practice once the Knicks get back on the court.
So should Knicks fans be worried about, Tom Thibodeau coming here but playing the young guys 40, 45 minutes a game like he did in Chicago with the Noahs and the Rose and Dangs? And should a Knicks fan be worried about that?
I think there's reason to be concerned based on track record. I mean, you'd be ignoring reality if you weren't concerned about it. But the way that Thibodeau has spoken about, his time off right after he got let go from Minnesota, he spent time with different NBA teams, the Clippers and other teams. And he spoke specifically about the Clippers, Doc Rivers, and how Doc had handled veterans over the course of an 82-game season versus young guys. And he talked about how the veterans sometimes didn't practice that hard. The young guys went hard, and he kept players fresh. Doc kept players fresh over the course of the season. So to me, that leads you to think that Thibodeau is at least open to changing his approach there. And that, approach could benefit the young Knicks and the older Knicks to stay fresh over the course of the regular season. And then once you get into the playoffs, if the Knicks get there, then you are fresher because of the approach you took in the regular season.
Now, did you notice that I saw it earlier from Tommy Beer that the Knicks have won 50-plus games 3 times in the last 25 years. The reason why that makes sense because it was 2013 with Mike Woodson. It was 2000 when Thibodeau was there, and 97 when Thibodeau was there. So you never know.
Yeah, connective tissue. Yeah, certainly coaches who have a history of winning who know what it's like to win in this market. And I think, people kind of dismiss that as being important. I don't necessarily agree. I think experience in the market, because this market is not unique, but it's different than most other markets. I think that's important. Whether it's the head coach having that experience or an assistant having that experience, I think it's important to have somebody with knowledge of the market on your staff, in your ear, somebody that you can access regularly.
So we had the 8th pick. Many fans were not happy about that. We wanted top 5, top 3, number 1. They want LaMelo Ball and those guys, but we're gonna have to settle for 8th, which is a common number we've been having recently with Ntilikina, Channing Frye, Jordan Hills of the world. What have you been seeing? What have you been hearing about the potential players that could be out there for New York? And do they go with the best player in the draft at that time, or do they draft by what they really need?
Well, coming into the draft, or actually a few months ago, I had heard that a couple areas of priority for the Knicks, even before Leon Rose came on board, was to get a guard who could knock down a perimeter shot to help space the floor, make Mitch Robinson more effective in pick and rolls, even more effective in pick and rolls, and to space the floor for R.J. Barrett. And I'd also heard that the Knicks were looking for a big man who could knock down shots for some of the same reasons, to help space the floor. So assuming that those two things are still priorities, I would think that you don't necessarily have to target one position over the other. Maybe you see who's available there and you take the best player available among those two positions. We know they've been looking for a point guard for most of the last 20 years. We know I know they scouted Cole Anthony heavily during the college season before Rose took over. I know that they've been on the phone with Killian Hayes, as have several other teams. I know that they had ranked LaMelo Ball pretty highly on their board as of a few weeks ago. So that's kind of where you are as far as intel with them at 8 or higher. I'd also know that Devin Vassell from Florida State has some fans at the Garden. So they're going to have options at 8 if they stay there, because this draft doesn't have that can't miss 1 or 2 players at the top and then it falls off a cliff. I think it's more even, balanced over the course of, the first round. So I think the Knicks will have options there. I don't think that they're going to shut the door on any of their options with regards to potentially trading up or trading down. And if you're talking about trading up, you're looking at the Golden State Warriors, because that's a team that Bob Myers is on record saying that he'd be open to moving his pick, which all teams say. But with Golden State, it's a little bit different because they have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green on their roster. Those are 3 veteran players. So does it make sense for them to draft a 19, 20-year-old with the number 2 overall pick? Or does it make sense for them to use that pick to get a veteran player that fits the timeline of Curry and Thompson and Green? I think a lot of teams around the league think that it's the latter, and that's why Golden State may be open for business with regards to trading that second pick.
So I've been saying on record that the Knicks need a point guard. Like you mentioned, they haven't had a dynamic point guard since like Marbury, in my opinion. They haven't really drafted point guards like that since Mark Jackson in the Strickland days. I think Cole Anthony, obviously he won't be the first choice for the Knicks, but if they can't get LaMelo, he ain't around at number 8. So could Cole Anthony be the guy that you take and say, you know what, he could be the point guard that we're looking for to run this team, to go with RJ, to go with Mitchell Robinson, keep that young core together, Kevin Knox as well. Ntilikina is still there. Can a Cole Anthony be, not saying the savior of the Knicks, but can he be that guy that can say, you know what, I'm going under the radar right now, but I can really go out there and do work at the Garden?
The interesting thing with Cole Anthony is he was so highly touted coming into his freshman season at UNC. The results from a win-loss perspective were not good at UNC when Cole was there. He got hurt. He came back from an injury. So you understand all that, and you just wonder maybe, as you're saying, Randy, is he being a little bit undervalued in this draft based on that freshman season at Carolina? And can he be more of the kind of prospect that people thought he was coming into his freshman year at North Carolina and exceed the current expectations? So, yeah, maybe you find something there in Cole Anthony. The other thing with Cole Anthony is if you like him, if you see him as your guy, maybe you could trade down because he's projected not to be as high as 8 in some of these mock drafts. And, these mock drafts aren't always accurate, but just based on that, maybe you could get him a little later than 8 if you like him. And I think that if anybody knows about Cole Anthony, it's going to be the Knicks because I think they've done a lot of work on him. And I'm not here to say that they would definitely take him at 8. I just know that if you do a lot of work on a player, scouting-wise, you do it because you're intrigued by him. So a lot of the scouting happened before Leon Rose came aboard. Leon may think differently than what the scouting says or said. So take all that with a grain of salt. But I do know that they, had an interest, were intrigued by Cole Anthony during the college season.
So can the Knicks be a player when it comes to free agency this year?
I think it's too early for them to be. You could maybe overpay somebody and then outbid the rest of the teams by a wide margin and lure that player in free agency. I think that's a possibility, but I don't think you're in a place where you can attract the player or win over other teams bidding for a player based on what you can offer on the court, because players know where this team is roster-wise. They know how much the team has struggled on the court the last few years. So there's not one player that's going to come here and it's going to propel you to a championship contender. The roster isn't there. So I think in free agency, I think my guess is what they'll be looking for are younger players, are players that are not going to be, 34, 35 at the end of a 5-year deal. Established all-stars. They're looking for younger players that more fit the timeline of the young core that they have on this roster.
Right.
And so I wouldn't expect them to commit big money to like a DeMar DeRozan because they're just not there yet.
Because the one name that keeps popping up on my timeline is VanVleet from Toronto.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the contract is, unrestricted, restricted for VanVleet going forward. But they keep saying VanVleet is going to look for a lot of money this summer from Toronto, from other teams. Have you heard or seen the Knicks could be in sort of quote unquote in play for a guy like Fred VanVleet come free agency?
Right. So he is unrestricted. And I think all the teams with enough cap space to make an offer for him will at least kick the tires on it and kind of discuss the possibilities of making an offer for Fred VanVleet. Very, very, very good young player and a point guard, area of need for the Knicks. So I would assume that the Atlantas, the Charlottes, the Knicks of the world, the teams with cap space, there's not many of them this summer, will at least, again, consider VanVleet and throwing big money at him. I would assume that he ends up staying with Toronto, but who knows? Once free agency starts, we also don't know where the salary cap is going to be. That's going to have a big impact on free agency. So I certainly would not rule out VanVleet as a possibility for the Knicks. A lot of it depends also on who they take in the draft, obviously. But he kind of fits that timeline of the young core that they have. He's still very young. So I just don't know if they want to commit big money. If Fred VanVleet is the free agent, they want to commit big money and long-term dollars to, because that contract, the VanVleet contract, whatever he ends up getting, unless he does a short-term deal, is going to tie up some of your cap space for years to come. And is VanVleet the player that Leon Rose wants to make that kind of commitment to? I'm not sure.
Last one before I let you go. Kind of a two-part question. One, I know the Knicks did not have a good year this season. They were in the bubble, so they ended play back in March. And we don't know when we'll see them again for next season. So what's your biggest takeaway from RJ Barrett's rookie year and this season's improvement of Mitchell Robinson?
With RJ, I think we all saw him impact the game in different ways. Defensively, he was able to rebound the basketball, passing the basketball. Obviously, the outside shot wasn't there as often as I'm sure he wanted it to be, the Knicks wanted it to be. But he was able to get to the basket pretty often. And so he showed you, I think, some promise. I think also off the court, a lot of people with the Knicks said that, listen, whatever his talent is, we think he's going to reach that fully because of his mental approach to the game. And he just doesn't get shaken. And he comes and he's a worker. And he day in, day out has the same approach, steady approach. So I think that is a reason for optimism if you're a Knicks fan. Obviously, he's got to work on his shot. He's got to be able to go both directions off the dribble. But all rookies have things they need to work on. The question, I guess, is some people say, is he going to be a star? Is he going to be a strong starter for 15 years? What's he going to be ultimately? I don't know what his ceiling is, but I think it depends a lot on how he develops his shot over time. And then Mitchell Robinson, defensively, just really good around the rim. Clearly has the athleticism to cover so much ground, defending pick and rolls and other actions. And he's disruptive around the rim. Offensively, clearly athletic enough to be able to finish on some difficult shots around the rim, has soft touch. He showed that by setting the NBA record for single-season field goal percentage, beating out Wilt Chamberlain for that mark, albeit in a shortened season.
Right.
What you I think are looking next for Robinson is, does he step out and start to shoot a jump shot comfortably? We've seen videos on social media of him shooting from the perimeter. He shot from the perimeter at practice last year before games. Do we start to see it in games? I think that's what you're looking for next out of Mitchell Robinson.
Well, Ian Begley, you're a very busy man, so I'm going to let you go. Always appreciate the conversation, to talk basketball and other things with you. They can follow you on Twitter at Ian Begley. Great work for SNY. Got your own podcast now called The Putback. What days and times can they find that?
That comes out Wednesdays in the afternoon around 4 p.m. And you find it on SNY's website. You can find it on my Twitter at Ian Begley. And I appreciate that mention, Randy. It's always good to talk to you. Always good to talk hoops. And I'm glad everybody on your side's doing well.
Likewise, man. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.